We're going to be in the book of Mark this morning, so you can turn to the book of Mark, and we're going to be in chapter 7. As you get there, I'm going to share with you a little bit of a story from about a decade ago. I was getting prepared to take my first trip to Indonesia. Tony and Kaylin were still in Indonesia at that point, and I was gearing up to lead a small trip, and I have to admit that I was pretty fearful as I was stepping into that first trip. And I wasn't afraid of the travel. It's a lot of flight time. We're almost literally on the other side of the world, but that didn't really bother me. I wasn't afraid of eating food that was different from the food I was used to eating. I wasn't afraid of, hammocking or roughing it. So we were sleeping on, strangers' front porches. That didn't really bother me. I wasn't even afraid of the bugs. I had some really good, insect repellent and my mosquito net all packed up. But if I'm honest, just a moment of vulnerability here, the reason that I was afraid is because I knew that we were traveling to the largest Muslim country in the world. And that scared me a little bit, or a lot of it. Some of that, I think, perhaps came from living through 9/11. And you who are younger may not remember that, but I was a freshman at Baldwin Wallace, right by the airport, when that day happened. And I think I was also influenced by Western media. Maybe this picture that we've been sold of what a Muslim looks like, or what's in their heart. We kind of, in an unfair way, can lump everybody together and categorize them. And if I'm completely honest, maybe you haven't traveled across the world like that, but you've probably felt something similar. You found yourself around people who are different than you. Maybe they have different beliefs, different background, different culture, different language, different lifestyle. And maybe one of those moments has caused you to feel a little bit uneasy, a little guarded, and maybe, like I was, a little fearful. Not because there was hate in your heart necessarily, but there was a lack of understanding, lack of familiarity. And if we could just be honest, it happens to all of us. I don't care how mature you get or how mature you think you are, it happens to all of us. And somewhere along the lines, what I have noticed is that it's actually easier for us, for our brains, to categorize people. Instead of dealing with every person as an individual, we lump people into categories based on their religion, based on their country of origin, based on their immigration status, based on the color of their skin, based on their politics, based on their morality, based on their socioeconomic status. We lump people into categories because it's easier, and what we can tend to do is then we divide those categories into safe and unsafe. People I want to be around and people I don't want to be around. People I trust, people I'll keep at a distance. And those categories have a way of creeping into our everyday life. And they start to cause division. Political division, racial division, ethnic division, socioeconomic division, the list goes on. And I am convinced, hear me, this is why I'm talking about this. I am convinced that these categorizations And these divisions are a scheme of the devil to stunt the forward movement of the gospel. Because if I have a person in a category that scares me, if they're in the far away instead of the near category, the odds that I will actually take the gospel to them significantly decrease. So the devil uses that. If I can divide you because of your politics, if I can root anger and bitterness or fear or whatever it happens to be in your heart, then I make it that much more difficult for you to share the love and message of Jesus with somebody. And this is a problem that doesn't just surface on Facebook or end up in an argument with a neighbor or frustrations around your Easter dinner table. Those decisions actually have eternal consequences. And it's right at the center of what Jesus wants to teach us today in Mark 7. So if you have your Bible open, look with me, Mark 7. We're in verse 24 today. And we're going to meet a person who fits into several categories. Several categories that would normally count her out. But then she encounters Jesus. Mark chapter 7, beginning in 24, we meet an unexpected outsider. That's my first heading. Verse 24. From there, he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house, and he did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell down at his feet. Now, the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. Now, there are some realities here. There are some racial, some religious, some gender biases. There's some bigotry at play here that's under the surface that you might not see as a 21st century American. So I want to try and tease it out so that this text makes sense. Jesus has spent the vast majority of his time thus far in Jewish territory, largely in Galilee, around the Sea of Galilee. And he went for a short time across the sea to a Gentile place, but he has spent the vast majority of time in Jewish territory because one of his tasks was to bring the message of God, the Father, to the Jewish people first. And maybe you haven't been at our whole series, but one of the things that you'll see is there are mixed responses from the Jewish people. There are some people who are leaning in and believing him, but they're the minority. Most people are either just wanting something from him, hey, heal me, fix me, give me, help me, and they want nothing else to do with him, or the religious leaders are kind of pressing him, challenging him. In fact, last week, the story that we talked about was the religious leaders, the Pharisees, come to him and they go, hey, how come you and your disciples don't follow all of the traditions that you're supposed to follow? And Jesus' answer is, I'm not concerned about outward religious performance. I'm concerned about the heart. That's what really makes a person pleasing to God. Well, they're all fired up, and there's actually some political pressure as well. So Jesus, in this story, takes leave. Now, the last time he tried to take a rest, he took a boat to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and the people see where he's going, and they run around the Sea of Galilee and meet him there where he's supposed to camp for a little vacation. So this time he decides to leave Jewish territory. He goes to a region called, well, the cities are called Tyre and Sidon. The region is Syro-Phoenicia to the northwest of Galilee on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, the northern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And that's Gentile territory. Now, Jews and Gentiles didn't mix, and that's a long story that I don't have time to get into this morning, but they didn't mix for religious reasons, for racial reasons, for political reasons, and the Jews sort of saw Gentiles as dirty, as unclean, as pagans, as less than. And so we meet this woman, and Mark is the shortest gospel of all four. So Mark never wastes a word, and he decides to tell us a couple things. One, she's a woman. Two, she's a Gentile, and not only a Gentile, but she's a Syro-Phoenician. So Mark wants you and I to see this woman has everything going against her when she walks into the house and encounters Jesus and 12 other male Jews. She's living in a culture that is male-dominated. Secondly, she's a Gentile around Jewish men. And normally, the right response of the Jews would have been to see her as less than. Third, she's Syro-Phoenician. Now, you probably haven't done a research paper on Syro-Phoenicia lately, but if you ever read the Old Testament, the Bible refers to this group of people that are the enemies of Israel throughout the Old Testament called the Canaanites. And Syro-Phoenicia is the same area. It's just under a new name and new leadership. So she's a Canaanite who are historically the enemies of the Jews and were known for these grotesque we have little people in the room. There were really bad things that the Canaanites did in their sacrifice to their pagan gods. And so we meet this woman, and what how Mark wants us to respond is to lean back. Mark intends that the readers would go, whoa, those are categories I'm not comfortable being around. And so apply it to your life. Whatever those categories are in your brain, they're racial, they're socioeconomic, maybe they're a specific part of town you don't want to drive through. Maybe it's people with a certain immigration status or sexual orientation, whatever it is. Apply it to your life. What are the categories where if you read it, you would go, whoa, I'm not so sure I want to be around these people. That's what Mark intends us to feel here. Every category that would have mattered culturally or religiously, this woman does not belong in the room. And yet she comes to Jesus, seemingly unashamedly. And I just want to pause here for a minute, because I've talked a bit about our problem of grouping people into categories, but it might be this morning that you feel like you are the category. Maybe because of your past, or could be 100 things. You walked into church this morning and you're like, is fire going to come down from heaven because I'm here? I'm not sure I belong in this room. Maybe your family situation is messy or complicated. Maybe your sexual past or present is confused or harmful. Maybe you've experienced racism from people in the church before. And you walk in and it looks pretty white in here. And you're looking around going, oh, I don't know if this is the church for me. Maybe your political views have made you wonder about Christian people. And so you're sitting here and you're just kind of wondering, is this the place for me? Can God still be available for me? It could be 100 different labels or categories that you feel like you're in. And I'll be honest with you. I'm probably going to fail you. And so are 100% of the people in this room. In our fallen state, we still lump people into categories. And as much as we try, and as much as we're on this journey of Jesus to transform our hearts, we still blow it. I blew it this week. I walked into a store, I saw somebody that was dressed really weirdly, and the first thing that popped in my head is, what a weirdo. And it was like this, and immediately I caught myself, and I'm like, this is what you're preaching about this weekend. But there are still things in my heart that are not yet refined or transformed. And so if you fit into a category, or if you feel like, hey, I might not belong, or if you're wondering, hey, can Jesus love somebody like me? I just want to tell you, I'm going to show you how Jesus responds. That's what you really need to see, because I'm going to blow it. My hope is that no matter what brought you here, that the people in this church would live differently than the world out there that you encounter. My hope would be that we would extend to you the love of Jesus and the grace of Jesus, that you would be transformed by Jesus. But I just want to be honest, we're going to mess up, so we've got to look at Jesus, because he is the one. If you want to know, how are Christian people supposed to act? How are Christian people supposed to live? How are Christian people supposed to respond to people that are in the categories? Jesus shows us. So let's look to Jesus. What he will show us is that there are no prerequisites to come to him. Zero. He doesn't care what you look like. He doesn't care who you've slept with. He doesn't care how much money you have. He doesn't care what your immigration status is. He doesn't care what color your skin is. He doesn't care what you've done. Jesus' invitation to you comes with zero prerequisites. Just what this woman displays: faith. We have an unexpected outsider, too, with an unmistakable faith. An unmistakable faith. Verse 27. And he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Now, we read this and we go, time out. Did Jesus just refer to this woman as a dog that needs to be fed after the humans that are at the table? Is that really what just happened? If we read this incorrectly, we can completely misunderstand the text and completely misunderstand the heart of Jesus. Because it seems like Pastor Joe just tried to get me to lean in and say, hey, Jesus is for everyone. And then Jesus turned around and called this woman, Gentile, Syrophoenician, a dog. Which is it? Well, we have to look at a couple things. First, if that's what Jesus were doing, it would be completely inconsistent with everything else that we've seen in the book of Mark. So we have to read this as a whole. Secondly, if that's really what Jesus was saying, if he was demeaning this woman intentionally, it would be at odds with the entire lesson that Mark is trying to teach us in the text. So the question is, what is Jesus doing here? Jesus is actually telling a parable. And I listened to a couple sermons on this text this week, and Sinclair Ferguson is a Scottish theologian and pastor, and the way that he described it I thought was perfect. He said, Jesus is doing something wonderful in this woman's life. He's probing her heart. So he's not trying to demean her. He's actually trying to figure out what's going on. Why? Well, like I mentioned earlier, everybody's coming to Jesus because they just want something from him. You ever have somebody come to you just because they want something from you? They're not interested in knowing you or building relationship with you. They just want what you've got. Jesus is testing her heart. He's communicating in a parable, this little short parable. I've come for the Jews. I've come for the Jews first. Now, this woman could have got angry. She could have got offended. She could have blown him up on social media. Jesus isn't pushing her away. He's actually drawing her out. And she's hanging on every word that he says. And she's actually pretty quick-witted as well. She responds, verse 28, yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. See, Jesus' lesson is not about people being more important than others. Jesus' lesson, he's not trying to demean her or call her a dog. It's actually a parable about humility. It's actually a parable about what we believe about ourselves. How worthy or acceptable we see ourselves before God. And she's paying attention to every word that he says. See, Jesus doesn't say, let the children be fed only. Jesus says, let the children be fed first. And this woman latches onto it. She goes, okay, well, if there's a first, then there's a second. And I'm good with seconds. And if it's thirds or if it's fourths, she says, Jesus, if you're doing the feeding, the crumbs from your table are more than enough to satisfy me. I don't need to be first in line. I can be second. I can be third. There's more than enough from you. Compare this woman, the female, Gentile, Syrophoenician, to the Jewish male disciples. Just a few chapters ago, oh my goodness, all these people that need to eat. Jesus goes, give them something to eat. They go, oh, 5 loaves, 2 fish. This is not even close to enough to feed all these people. And yet we have this woman who goes, oh, the crumbs from you, Jesus? More than enough. See, This is the first woman to do two things. The first thing that she does is she actually understands one of his parables. Not a single person, go back, read the first 6.5 chapters of Mark, not a single person has understood one of his parables. Even his closest disciples that spend all day, every day with him, he tells them a parable and they go, what are you talking about? Can you explain it to us? And, look again, verse 28, but she answered him, yes, comma, Lord. Go do the research. Not a single person has called Jesus Lord yet in the book of Mark. This woman from a foreign land has this extraordinary faith, and she's the first one to speak to him as he ought to be spoken to. Parables are not meant, they're not a riddle to figure out. Let me see if I can figure out what this parable means. There, see, I undid the puzzle, got it. Neither are parables lessons for somebody else. Parables are intended for you and I to jump into them and see ourselves in the parable. So the woman jumps into the parable, and what she sees in herself is unworthiness. She sees in herself unworthiness to be in Jesus' presence, over against the Jewish religious leaders who come with this pride and arrogance. If I could just press on this a little bit, over against some church people who we can get years down the road after our salvation journey and think, I'm a pretty good person. God's lucky to have me on his team. And we put other people in this category, and we forget what Paul said in 1 Corinthians, and such were some of you. But you were washed. You were sanctified by the blood of Jesus. That's the only reason that you're in the family. See, this woman sees herself clearly, and Jesus goes, yes, that's what I'm looking for. This is the heart. This is the heart that I'm looking for. Oh, I can work with this. She answered him, yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Jesus draws out her heart, and he finds exactly what he's looking for. A heart that says, I don't need to be first. I just need you. And Mark wants us to see the juxtaposition between the Jewish people and the religious people, and this woman who fits every negative category. She has unmistakable, undeniable faith. The most extraordinary faith that I think we've seen yet in the book of Mark. Maybe the most extraordinary faith that we will see in the entire book. And she proves it by, my third point, an unbelievable response. So Jesus, I can only imagine, I wish that the Bible would have little notes for the look on Jesus' face. I think Jesus is grinning from ear to ear in this moment, where she immediately, so my wife has a really quick wit, so I just don't get into arguments with her, because she has a mind like a steel trap and can remember everything. And whenever I try to argue, she has the quickest comeback, and I'm like, shut up, I'm out of here, right? This woman has a really quick wit. So she immediately puts herself into the parable. She responds with faith in a very clever way, in my opinion. And Jesus goes, oh, for this statement, you can go your way. The demon has left your daughter. He loves what he sees in this woman. Extraordinary humility coupled with extraordinary faith. He loves what he sees in her, and he goes, you can go your way. Your daughter is healed. Now, I love the first couple words of verse 30. And she went home. I just wonder if that's how I would have responded, or if that's how you would have responded. If I might have balked a little bit at that. Wait a minute, are you sure? Why don't you come with me? Let me get, this is what we do. Let's get somebody on FaceTime so I can see proof. There's no argument. She doesn't argue. She doesn't hesitate. She doesn't ask for reassurance. She doesn't say, hey, can you come with me? She doesn't say, oh, how am I supposed to know that? She just, like we sang a minute ago, just takes him at his word and gets up and goes home. Before she sees anything change, before she feels anything different, before she has any evidence in her hands, that walk home, man, I wonder what that was like. A few weeks ago, we were talking, and Christy, one of our staff members, said to me, I've heard people say before that the opposite of faith is fear. She goes, it's not. The opposite of faith is sight. And she's right. And man, we love sight, don't we? That's a constant question on our lips. God, what are you doing? It's not necessarily wrong to think those things or ask those questions. But often I find that we prefer sight to faith when Jesus is looking for faith. We want it to make sense. We want to be secure in the outcomes. We want to make sure that we have some guarantees before we step forward. And this woman just goes, your word is good enough. I'm going home. Now, how do we turn the corner? Because we got to figure out what God, through Mark, is saying to us. But before we can do that, we actually have to understand what Mark is saying to his original audience and why. So we have 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All of them tell the story of Jesus' life and ministry. And each of them were written for a specific purpose. Mark's aim, we've talked about this a while back, but we haven't revisited it in quite a long time. Mark's aim, Mark's audience, was he was writing to believers who were in Rome, a Gentile city, undergoing severe persecution for being Christians. Nero was dipping some of them into wax and using them as human candles in his garden. He was throwing them to wild animals in the Colosseum for entertainment. Nero was burning them alive. And so Mark puts this story in his gospel for a reason. When he sends this to the Christians in Rome, why does Mark want them to read this story? Because Mark knows the human heart, and that there's a tendency for us to lump people into categories. And when we lump people into categories, especially people that we're afraid of, then our effectiveness for the gospel is diminished. And so Mark wants them to see their Gentile Roman oppressors not in a category of people that we fear or people that we hate or people that we're filled with rage towards. Mark wants to see them as individual humans who still desperately need the love and grace of Jesus. Mark is using this story as the prime example of how to engage people that fit into the categories that we're uncomfortable with. So that a believer in Rome might see a Roman soldier and not dismiss them, not hate them, not burn with rage and anger towards them, but might see them with the eyes of Jesus. And that, yes, even these Roman guards who have sent people into the Colosseum to be murdered are in need of a Savior. Because if they give up and they stop sharing the love and message of Jesus, if they just put people into categories, the blood of the martyrs is wasted. And Mark wants you to see this as well. Because as the people of God, far too often, we live like the world lives, lumping people into categories. And we go, I'm just going to be with my people. This feels safe. This feels good. This feels comfortable. And so people who don't share my political opinions, people who are from a part of town that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with, fill in the blank. I got on a plane and I flew to Indonesia. And I was scared, like I mentioned. And I'm not sure what to call it. Racism? Maybe. I've been thinking about that. What do I call that? What I was feeling? Prejudice? Bigotry? Bias? I don't know. But I remember legitimately feeling, I'm afraid to go to this country because the people there are Muslims. I have this picture in my brain of what a Muslim is like. So I get to the island. This is one of the first people I met. He doesn't look very scary, does he? He even let me borrow his hat. And look at that. Put his arm around me. Got some time to help him work on his farm. This next picture is these are the first guys that I met on the island, Firman and Samsul. They don't really look like what you might see in the media, do they? Young guys, pretty cool guys. I stepped onto that island and I met some of the most kind, generous, hospitable, lovely people that I've ever met in my entire life. Are there people on that island who wouldn't welcome me? There are. But in God's grace, He caused me to experience something that broke down the categories in my heart and in my mind and began to help me see through the lens of Jesus a little bit more clearly. I had long conversations with these guys, and they shared with me about their upbringing and their life and their religion. And I was able to say, hey, can I tell you about a man who has changed my whole life? And they didn't get angry at me. They didn't want to fight with me. They said, yeah, we'd be glad to hear about that. I still pray for these guys 11 years later. I don't know what's going on in their life or where they're at, but I'm glad that I shared the love and message of Jesus with them. This lesson, what Jesus is teaching us here in Mark chapter 7, is extraordinarily important for the 21st century American church. Because if you turn on the news or scroll your phone, there are categories everywhere. And it is the scheme of the devil. Listen to me. The devil is trying to confuse you and use you. And one of the ways that he does that is by causing us to jump on the train that the rest of the world is on, categorizing people as threats and as problems and as enemies and as issues to solve. Whether the issue be immigration or politics or war or sexual identity or morality, fill in the blank. The devil is on a mission to confuse the primary aim of your life here. And when we get caught up in believing the lies, in believing that people belong in categories, in believing that our primary aim in this life is to be comfortable or safe, the gospel effectiveness in your life, in your marriage, in your family dies. And Mark simply won't have it. And so he says to us, look to the example of Jesus. Don't look at the news. Stop using Instagram or Twitter or Facebook as your example of how to act. Look to Jesus. Look at how he lives. Look at how he responds to people. Look at how he steps forward in faith without fear. Look how he doesn't put this woman into a broad category and presume about her. He's looking right into her eyes. He's not concerned about every other Gentile and every other Syro-Phoenician. He's not concerned about her past, what people group she's coming from, what all the rest of the Jews think. He's concerned about her. And what he finds is the most extraordinary faith that he has yet to see. And the world would have you and I completely miss those opportunities because we live in fear and we categorize people, and it's much easier and it's much safer to just do life that way. I'm begging you, church, we've got to look to Jesus as our example. That even the crumbs from his table are more than enough to satisfy the most thirsty soul. The slightest drop of blood from his hand is enough to save the most wayward human being. The smallest speck of faith in him is enough to transform the heart of a Roman who just sent Christians to their death in the Colosseum. Hear me, there is no one that is beyond the grace and love of Jesus Christ. And so don't let fear get in your way of the faith that it takes to step into what is uncomfortable for the sake of their eternity. Don't let the devil win this battle. Think of the disciples just a few chapters ago who are on the ship and things are getting really stormy. And I'll just say, we're in really stormy weather in our country right now, in our world right now. And what is Jesus going to find? Is he going to say to you and to me, like he did to his disciples, oh, you of little faith? May it not be true of us. Might he find in us the faith of the Syro-Phoenician woman. This place, this building, is an embassy of a different kind of kingdom. And you are an ambassador of a different kind of king. That's what Jesus says to Pilate right before his crucifixion. Pilate goes, "Are you a king?" He goes, "We're not even talking about the same thing, dude. My kingdom is completely otherworldly." And yet we're so prone as humans to worry about this kingdom, about our politics. Jesus is saying, he's reminding us in Mark 7 today, you are an ambassador of a different king who has an eternal kingdom. And so the way that you treat people, the categories you put people into matters. Look to Jesus and live just like him. Let's pray. Father, this is an unbelievable task. Oh, there is fear and bitterness and opinions and hatred that live inside of each of us. And we need you to transform us. We need you to root it out. We want hearts that are like yours, Jesus. We want to live like you, and we can't just flip the switch today and go out and start doing it. We actually need you to come and help. We desperately need your help. And so would you do it? There are 100 different solutions in this room that are needed. Every heart, every mind, every life. Apply to each of us what it is that we need, that we might be ambassadors of your love and your message for your glory, for our good, and the testimony of Jesus Christ. We ask in his name, amen.